What do you think? Right? So now we have to get into some discussion about what is religion or what religion is. And by not believing in God, does it make Buddhism a non-religion? That's a question that you have to look furthermore. So, but this afternoon, we will talk about the practice in living and dying that the Theravada, people who practice Theravada Buddhism, doing, and who are they? Usually, people who believe in Theravada Buddhism live in the part of the South and Southeast Asia. Most of us know that Buddhism starts in 6th century BC in India, and 3 centuries after that it got spread through other parts of Asia. The famous one that most of you in the Western world associate Buddhism with Mahayana practice went to Korea, China, Japan, Tibet. The one that goes to the south for the countries such as Burma, Thailand, Sri Lanka. They really practice closer to the teaching of the Buddha during his period. So from the term Theravada itself, it means that the word of the Buddha, Theravada, Thera, the Lord, the learned one, Vada, the words, the teaching, and so Theravada stay very close to the teaching of the Buddha during this period. Sometimes Mahayana would call us Hinayana, which means the smaller vehicle. And for Mahayana, it means the great vehicle. For Theravada, ourselves, we consider us the ones who practice according to the words of the Buddha. And the way to get to enlighten, you have to help yourself. So it's more of the individualistic practice to get to enlighten. We don't believe so much in the bodhisattva that we have to go through and then help the universal to get enlightened at one time. In Theravada practice, the main thing that we try to do is stay close to the Four Noble Truths, and also thank you. Okay, and we try to stay close to the Four Noble Truths. And one way to do that, we have to try to understand the basic nature of human beings and the basic nature of universe. How many of you feel happy all the time, never have problems in your life? Raise your hand. No, right? So the most basic truth is we have to have some kind of unhappiness, unsatisfactory, some anxiety, like me just now, to get through this. But however, we have some comfort in thinking that this thing will just go through contemporary. My time will end up in 5 minutes pretty soon, and then I don't have to feel nervous anymore until the next period. And so just the basic truth that we have to admit the basic thing that happened to us, and we cannot avoid that. That is dukkha. Some people try to explain dukkha in terms of suffering, but dukkha is more than just suffering. Because sometimes when you feel suffer, or you suffer, you don't have enough money until the end of the month, or you're not happy with your co-worker. But sometimes there's something in ourselves that we just feel that we need something, just not just the material that would help us through our life. And for the Theravada, we try to reason or use our own thinking to reason to us, to ourselves, and see if we can do anything to go through this life. And one thing that we emphasize is, besides impermanent, not everything just contemporary and it will pass. But if everything is just contemporary, is impermanent, so how about ourselves? The thing that we call mind and body, and wisdom will be try to look at things like in two different mind and body. So we know that ourselves will decay. The physical part, the body part will decay. How about the spiritual part? What is it that makes us living? So is there any self at all that we try to hang on to? When we feel unhappy, because is that ourself feel unhappy? Which part of the body that makes us feel unhappy? The mind or the body? Is it too cold in this room? Is that the physical part? Or is that our mind elsewhere thinking about things that we haven't get done yet, or things that we have to do in the future? So if we realize that nothing is permanent, so there's no permanent self either. And so for the Theravada, try to go through this living and get ready for the next stage. Most of Theravada try to practice samatha and vipassana is a form of meditation. And we use lots of reason and try to look into ourselves and try to understand the other human by understand ourselves first and understand the other human being. And this afternoon, we will learn more from people who really practice vipassana in their life, personal life, and also professional life. The first speaker that will be talking to us this afternoon is Miss Samantha Suarez. She will be a good example of the person that tries to use vipassana in her future, even current professions. Samantha is a PhD candidate in clinical psychology at Forest Institute. Because of her career dealing with people that are not so happy, I guess. And so she tried to use her practice in vipassana, try to teach them to meditate, to understand the other human being from the compassion, the basic teaching in Buddhism, and use the Brahma Vihara, that's one of the Theravada teaching in dealing with social action of social group. How could you interact with other people? What kind of guidance that you would have? So all this, Samantha will tell us more what she's been doing. And also because of her interest in religion, she's getting another degree, the master's degree from the University of Hawaii Religion Department also. And she's been very active in Vipassana Hawaii group. Her guiding teacher are the co-founders of Vipassana Hawaii. That is Steve Smith and Michelle McDonald-Smith, who's basically going travel, helping people trying to meditate. So it's my pleasure to bring to you Ms. Samantha Suarez, who will tell us more about compassion and equanimity, vital tools for health professionals. Welcome.
Can you hear me? meditate. And I'm just here because Michelle was my main teacher and Kamala were invited by Lecture to speak today. And Michelle is out teaching over in the mainland. So she asked me to just share with you some of her thoughts. And what she thought would be helpful to talk about today would be to discuss something called the 4 Brahma Viharas, and specifically 2 of them, compassion and equanimity. Since I'm a mental health worker, and Michelle herself has worked with terminally ill patients and people with a lot of severe health problems, we thought that, at least for me personally, and Michelle experienced the same, our own work, our personal work, and developing compassion and equanimity in our meditation has helped us to deal with the pain that we experience when we're dealing with people who suffer so much. So this is where this whole talk is going to sort of focus. It's going to be mainly focusing on the development of compassion and equanimity for the health worker and for a family member or anyone who deals with terminally ill patients or a dying person or somebody who really suffers deeply and can't really get out of that state, like some of the chronic mental health patients that I work with. After a while, it just gets to be very difficult to be engaged in a relationship with that person and not being able to help it. So compassion and equanimity sort of gave me personally the ability to continue on time and try my best. I think since Kamala is going to talk about metta, loving kindness, which is the first of the Brahma Viharas, I'm going to focus on equanimity and compassion, and then she's going to talk about metta and mindfulness meditation. And at the end, I think at 3:45, she's going to do a guided metta, which is going to be sort of a live demonstration of what I'm kind of talking about. Because what I'm talking about is the actual practice, what we actually aim to do personally when we're meditating. The content of this talk is by far not mine. This comes from Sharon Salzberg's last book on the Brahma Viharas. It's called Loving Kindness. Sharon is another main teacher of this group of teachers who actually began studying under Upanishad from Burma. Kamala, Michelle, Steve Armstrong, Sharon Salzberg, Joseph Goldstein. They all belong to a group of people who started a center in Barre, Massachusetts called the Insight Meditation Society. And they travel worldwide teaching. And we are very, very, very fortunate to have Kamala, Stephen, and Michelle. All 3 reside here in Hawaii. So, what I'm going to hear is from Michelle and Sharon, just kind of reading it, okay? The Abhidhamma is the main textbook of one of the main textbooks of the Theravada tradition. And the Abhidhamma describes the 4 Brahma Viharas as sublime modes of living. Brahma means sublime, and Vihara means state of conduct or state of living. They are states of mind to be developed or nourished by the meditator. They are also said to be limitless or boundless, because when developed, these thoughts are radiated towards all beings without limitations and without boundaries. The 4 Brahma Viharas are metta, which means loving kindness, karuna, which means compassion, mudita, which means sympathetic joy, and upekkha, which means equanimity. The Abhidhamma describes these 4 states of mind by giving us first their definition, then their direct enemy, their indirect enemy, their chief characteristic, and what it's aiming at modifying or eliminating. First one is metta, and metta means loving kindness, benevolence, goodwill. It is that which softens the heart. Its direct enemy, or the opposite mind state, is hatred, ill will, and aversion. Its indirect enemy, which is a mind state which kind of looks like metta, but it really isn't, is personal affection or karma love. Its chief characteristic is a benevolent attitude, or the wish for the good and happiness of all beings. Metta aims at eliminating ill will and hatred from one's heart. The second Brahmavihara is karuna, and is defined or translated as compassion, or that which makes the heart of the good quiver when others are subject to pain and suffering. It is the ability to empathize and almost symbiotically sort of experience someone's pain. Its direct enemy, or the mind state directly opposite to it, is wickedness. Wickedness, like the people Its indirect enemy, or that state of mind which often kind of gets confused with compassion, is passionate greed. Its chief characteristic is the ability to embrace sorrow. Sorrow-stricken beings who are really in pain. And it aims at eliminating cruelty. The third is mudita, and is defined as sympathetic or appreciative joy. Its direct enemy is jealousy, and its indirect enemy is exhilaration. Its chief characteristic is happiness in others' prosperity and success. So it's that congratulatory attitude of the mind. Mudita aims at eliminating aversion or dislike. Upekkha is the last of the four Brahmaviharas, and it literally means to view impartially, with neither attachment nor aversion. It is not indifference, but perfect equanimity, or a well-balanced mind. Its direct enemy is attachment, and its indirect enemy is callousness. Its chief characteristic is an impartial attitude, and it aims at eliminating clinging and aversion. These four Brahmaviharas, or sublime modes of living, or sublime refuges for the mind, like I like to call them, are what we try to develop as part of our meditation. So they are states of mind to be developed within ourselves. When working with people who experience severe pain, compassion and equanimity seem to be the two that are really most needed. And the reason for that is because unless the person you're working with kind of feels that you really can empathize with the pain they're going through, and almost able to acknowledge that this is the state they're in, it's hard for them to believe that you can really help them. On the other hand, if you are too enmeshed in that pain, it becomes hard for you to be able to skillfully help them. So that's when equanimity comes in place. So I'll talk first about compassion. Keep watching the timer. I'll talk first a little bit about compassion and what developing compassion means. And I'll share more or less what we do in meditation when we're trying to develop compassion within ourselves. Sometimes we think that to develop an open heart, to be truly loving and compassionate, means that we need to be passive, to allow others to abuse us. But in the contrary, compassion is not at all weak. It is the strength that arises out of seeing the true nature of suffering in the world. Compassion allows us to bear witness to that suffering, whether it is in ourselves or in others, without fear. The feeling we call compassion can, however, be misunderstood. It is easy to think that the meaning of compassion could be taken to include a state of being overcome or overwhelmed by the suffering of others. The literal translation of the Pali word karuna means experiencing a trembling or a quivering to the heart in response to a being's pain. But compassion should not be debilitating. To be overwhelmed by pain can lead us into despair, grief, aimlessness, and even anger. In his book, How Can I Help?, Ron Dawes writes, "It is one thing to have one's heart engaged, and another to have it overwhelmed or broken. Here lies our aversion to suffering." If we feel that our hearts will break, that we will be overwhelmed by the pain, that we cannot bear what's going on, we find it difficult to really open to pain. However, opening to pain is the first step to develop true compassion. Being able to recognize, open to, and acknowledge that pain and sorrow exist everywhere, in one way or another. Living beings suffer everywhere. This is the first step in developing compassion. Although suffering is definitely not all there is in life, it is something that needs to be recognized clearly if we are to develop true compassion. If we were just to look at our own experience, we can easily see that suffering it really is everywhere where we are. We are brought up to somehow, though, think that suffering is wrong or is to be avoided, and at times even denied. We get the idea that suffering is unbearable and should not be faced. So we create a society that accommodates our need to deny pain as best we can. We take people who are sick, people who are crazy, people who are old, people who are dying, and put them out of sight in institutions. But these are forms of suffering we all share. There's so much humiliation and bitterness about getting old, growing old, getting sick, and dying, that we feel that we have to hide the pain, and the pain we feel when we see pain. When we deny our experience, though, we are moving away from something real into something that's fabricated. The truth is really hard to face, but until we acknowledge that suffering is one of the very natures of life, we can't really connect with anyone. The goal of our spiritual practice then should be to be able to understand, to be able to look without illusion or projections at what is natural in this life and what's actually happening for others and for ourselves. More difficult than acknowledging pain, though, is opening to pain. This is the second step in developing compassion. Opening to pain and establishing an appropriate relationship to pain. In order to genuinely open to pain, we need to do it a little bit at a time. If our opening is forced, we'll most likely become overwhelmed and our purpose is shattered. Sometimes pain and suffering can be too much and too powerful. And when we open to them, we tend to displace them so that even though we see suffering, we have a need to become able to control it as if we could sort of turn on and off. When we feel that we are not able to control the suffering within us, then we tend to feel angry, fear, and grief. Anger, fear, and grief are compassion's indirect enemies because they disguise themselves as compassion. Cruelty is compassion's direct enemy because it's clearly its opposite. It's much harder for us to detect when we're feeling angry and grief and to think that we're being compassionate towards someone than to see that we're just being really cruel. But it's important to realize that experiencing anger and grief is not the same thing as being compassionate. Because we can feel angry at injustices, as misuse of power, as deterioration of communities and families, and we feel sorrow and grief over people that we lose and things that we lose. But this is not true compassion. The essential difference between anger, fear, and grief and compassion is that those feelings can overwhelm us. And when we are honest enough to look at our inner reality and see that, feeling that fear and that grief is actually destroying us, it's causing us to have ulcers, panic attacks, we realize that that's not true compassion. Compassion, as the trembling of the heart, arises with the quality of equanimity. It is a state of mind where there is no bitter and no judgment of oneself or of others. A compassionate mind does not see the world as good or bad, right or wrong, good or evil, but just as suffering and the end of suffering. Some things bring pain, some things bring happiness, and that's the way it is. When we're able to see only suffering and the end of suffering, then we do true compassion. Then we can act in energetic ways, but without the effects of that aversion to pain. True compassion leads to action without anger and without aversion. Compassion also requires that we are able to see people from where they are coming from. Compassion means taking the time to look at conditions, at building blocks of any situation. We need to have the openness and spaciousness to see that both conditions from the past and conflicts from the present are things that lead someone to do something. The Buddha expressed compassion in many different ways. His service to beings ranged from caring for the sick to teaching the path of liberation. For the Buddha, those two things were not different at all. The development of a compassionate heart is thus not just an idealistic endeavor. It arises from first being willing to look at and face the truth of suffering, and secondly, from being willing to open to suffering. Through the practice of the Brahman Vihara of compassion, we can develop a mind that is vast and free. Basically, how we go about doing that in this tradition is by doing a meditation in compassion. And this meditation basically is sort of repeating two phrases to yourself. And you usually have an object in mind, and the first object of compassion meditation is someone with great physical or mental suffering. So you have to select a person, a real person, who you think is really going through a lot of pain, and recite that phrase with that person in mind. The two phrases used for compassion are, may you be free of your pain and sorrow, and may you find peace. We need to keep in mind, however, that what we are doing in the compassion meditation is purifying and transforming our relationship to suffering, whether it is our own or that of others. But when dealing with severe pain and suffering people, compassion alone really isn't enough. The four sublime states culminate with equanimity, the Pali word effect, which means balance. Its characteristic is to arrest the mind before it falls into extremes. Equanimity is a spatial stillness of the mind, a radiant calm that allows us to be present, fully, with all the different changing experiences that constitute our world and our lives. I have said that a few essential concepts that we need to develop in order to, you need to understand in order to develop compassion are: one, an acknowledgement and acceptance of suffering; two, and the willingness to open to suffering. Those two are essential to develop compassion. The two most important concepts we need to understand in the development of equanimity are the unavoidability of change and impermanence in life, and the concept of karma. And I have 5 minutes to tell you about that. If we look carefully inside and outside ourselves, we can clearly see that there is change and impermanence in the world. And that's one of the Four Noble Truths. In order to develop equanimity, we need to have a clear understanding and an acceptance of impermanence. When we open to that truth, then we discover that there is no need to hold on, to push away, or to control anything. And that our need for security is actually an illusion. Because it's not until we accept that life is impermanent and that things change that we can finally be secure and happy. The Buddha talked about 6 ways in which we can experience the world. These are the 6 doors of perception: seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, and through the mind door by thinking, feeling, and seeing mental images. Those 6 ways of perceiving define the totality of our experience. The Buddha went on to say that every single moment of being alive, which involves one of the 6 experiences, has a tone feeling to it. It can be pleasurable, it can be painful, and it can be neutral. Of course, if you deal with something that's painful, you want to push it away. If you deal with something that's pleasurable, you want to keep it. And neutral things, we just kind of hang in there until something bad could come around. So basically, our hearts and minds are like little monkeys jumping from between one of these 3 states of mind. The Buddha taught, though, that we can feel pleasure fully, yet without craving and clinging to it. And you can experience pain without feeling really totally hurt. And this is a state of equanimity, is an unreactive way of being. Equanimity is based on an understanding that the conflict and frustration we feel when we can't control the world does not mean that we are unable to do so, but it means that we are trying to control something that is uncontrollable. And that type of realization is what comes from equanimity. It's realizing that the ability of letting go and accepting is what's going to get us through life. Equanimity is taught as the final meditation among the Brahma-viharas because it provides the balance for loving kindness, compassion, and sympathetic joy. These 3 opens the heart in a wish for well-being for all beings. We say, may you be happy, or loving kindness, may you be free from suffering, for compassion, and may your joy never cease, or sympathetic joy. Equanimity balances those heartfelt wishes with the recognition that things are the way they are. However we may wish for something, most results are beyond our control. The other important concept to understand is the concept of karma, which I'm not going to go into too much. But I'd like to read to you something that Sharon says. She mentions about karma. Karma is the womb out of which we all spring. Everything that befalls us is, in some way, really ourselves. The intentions that motivate our choices of words and actions determine our happiness. Karma thus points to personal responsibility. And this is what I came to feel comfortable in understanding the meaning of karma as being personal responsibility. Meditation on equanimity focuses on developing that state of mind within ourselves. And the phrases that we used are, all beings are the owners of their karma. Their happiness and unhappiness depend upon their actions, not upon my wishes for them. So we start traditionally this meditation by generating equanimity towards a person who's seen to be the easiest, which is a neutral person. And then we go on to try and generate equanimity also towards a benefactor, or somebody who has done something positive and good to you, a friend, then an enemy, oneself, all beings from different directions, and on and on. So these are the two Brahmaviharas that Michelle asked me to sort of talk about briefly, because in her experience and in my experience as her student were the two that really helped me dealing with my own patients and her dealing with her difficult students. You have here one of our great teachers who is also my teacher, and who later on is going to be doing a guided method. So you're going to have to get a little taste of what it is to develop one of the realm we hires within ourselves. If you want to stay for that, thanks.
Thank you so much, Samantha. So we have the basic social interaction for Theravada. It's Brahma Vihara. I know that this terminology is very strange for you, very foreign. So I try to put it out there to help, because I understand that we have some students that taking class for this summer also. And I don't have room to put the other Pali word like Samantha mentioned, like Metta, Karuna, Mudita, Ubeka. And then during the break, if you're interested, so we can share it with you. And what we learned so far is how to identify the cause of this dukkha or suffering, and how to try to control it, understand it, and control it, accept it, or live with it. And now we will get to another practical part in going through our life and then get ready for the next step. We need to have one of the co-founders of Vipassana Hawaii, Miss Kamala Masters. She started this group together with Stephen Smith, and then his wife, Michelle McDonald Smith, that you have heard Samantha mentioned earlier, her teacher. And also, like she mentioned, we are very fortunate that we have 4 of the Vipassana teachers reside here in Hawaii and trying to give us some guidance and share some Dharma with us. Kamala has lots of experience in helping you go through this status of life that you may not be so satisfied with, and how to cope with it, understand it. And loving kindness that she will concentrate in her talk this afternoon will be part of the 4 Brahma Vihara that Samantha mentioned earlier. I have some, sorry, but I think we can do that later, one of the other. David chapter 1 me to announce something, but I think we can do that later. I don't want to break the continuity right now. So it's my pleasure to present to you Miss Kamala Masters from Maui, and she just came back from Canada to share with us some of her experience in going through this process of contemplative living and then get ready for the next stage. Miss Kamala Masters.
During the past 18 years, I've been living on Maui, and I've been working at the cemetery there, aside from teaching the Dharma in different places of the world. And it's been a great honor for me to interface with people who are grieving and people who are dying, because those experiences have helped to cultivate my own compassionate heart, and my own heart that can be more filled with kindness and a sense of interconnecting with all beings in this world during a time of great suffering. For most of my life, I think, most of my life, And I've seen through my own practice and my own inner experience and my interaction with people that I teach and also people that I work with at the cemetery, that when we resist how life is in this moment, we suffer. But when we can flow with the river of our karma or the river of our responsibility for ourselves, then we have a more peaceful kind of a life. So this practice has enabled me to connect more with life, and it's enabled me to develop more these qualities that Samantha talked about, like kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. If we notice in our lives, we have very habitual responses to life. We learn these responses from those who are around us and the society. And it's very difficult to respond in any other way. When something happens that we don't like, we usually respond with aversion or some kind of anger or irritation or some level of that. If something happens that we like, we usually respond with attachment. We want to hold on to it, and we may fear that we may lose it. And so, in this part of the Buddhist teachings, what we are being inspired to cultivate are 4 responses to life that one of my teachers said, if we responded to life with just these 4 kind of human emotions, we would get along just fine. Compassion, equanimity, loving kindness, and sympathetic joy. And we wouldn't need any other human emotion in order to live with life. During my work at the cemetery, I see quite often that it becomes very, very important for those who are dying and those who are grieving over the impending death of a loved one or a death of a loved one, that it's very, very important for that person to let those around in family and those who are dying know that they love that person. It becomes less and less important to receive love and more important to give love and understanding. And I noticed that very much in the last years of my own practice too, that it has become more and more important for me to give understanding to others and to give love to others, and less important to receive it. And I think this comes from an ever-deepening understanding and importance of accepting life as it is, of being able to live in the present moment. So first I'd like to talk about this quality of awareness or mindfulness that the Buddha taught, and which is taught in the practice of vipassana. Vipassana is a Pali word that means seeing things as they really are, without any filters, without the filters of aversion, or the filter of greed, or maybe the filter of not seeing clearly, of ignorance. So it's a quality of mind that keeps us in the present moment, not in the past, not in the future, but just in this moment. It's very rare. If you notice, if you can take some time to notice, most of the time we're not in the present moment. We're thinking about what has happened in the past. Maybe we're having remorse or even some recollection and review of it and some happiness from what has happened in the past, or maybe something in the future, or worried about, we have anxiety about, we're crying about. We're very rarely in the present moment. And in the teachings of the Buddha and in my own experience, it's only in this present moment that we can be free. We can't be free from the suffering. We can't be totally at peace and rest if we're in the past or in the future. So when we have this kind of mindful awareness, this kind of ability to be in the present moment, the mind has a very deep kind of rest and stillness. It's the soft quality of mind, soft, open, yet very precise. It happens without judging, without comparing, without condemning, without holding on, without wanting more, without pushing away. It's a quality of mind that's just completely clear and at rest in the present moment. A kind of a profound stillness. From this stillness, we can see life more clearly. There's an old Chinese proverb or haiku, and it goes something like this. In running water, one cannot see his true face, but in still water, one can see clearly the true nature of his own face. We can see ourselves much more clearly from the still place in our hearts, where we can be silent, and we can look clearly into the pool of our present moment in minds. So, when we're mindful, when we're aware, we're not living with filters. We're seeing clearly how life is. And in that seeing clearly, we're able to access other qualities of our mind and heart that can respond to life more skillfully. And we don't have to respond in a habitual way that may be unskillful, may cause other people or ourselves some kind of hurt or pain or suffering. So we begin to see that from this still place we can have more rest, and we can also experience life more clearly. We can accept life more. And then from this stillness, this acceptance, from there we're able to see what to do, how to respond to life. And we can let go more easily. Since this seminar has to do with death, how Buddhists respond, or the Buddhist way of looking at death and dying, I pulled out some advice from Ajahn Chah. I don't know if any of you are familiar with Jack Kornfield. He's written many books on this path, and he has a different lineage teacher than I do. I respect this teacher very much. His name is Ajahn Chah. He's comes from the forest monastery in Thailand. And once when someone was dying, they recorded and wrote down what he said to this person about letting go and accepting how things are. Ajahn Chah says, so let go, put everything down, everything except just the awareness. Don't think a lot. Just think this is the way things are. Right now, nobody can help you. There is nothing your family or possessions can do for you. All that can help you now is the correct awareness. So don't waver, just let go. This kind of letting go at the time of death, or in our lives, because if we look closely, in every moment we're dying and being born again. This kind of letting go is not something that we can learn just from a textbook or from hearing somebody else talk about it. We must understand how to do it for ourselves. And it only comes with this kind of deep and profound awareness, ability to be present in each moment of life. I'd like to expand a little bit on compassion because I've had some experiences in my own life as a mother that helped me connect with compassion in a very indirect way. And it helped me connect with compassion actually through anger. About a couple of years ago, or almost 2 years ago, my daughter, who is now 26 years old, called me from the hospital in California, and she said that she couldn't walk, and her baby, who was now quite 2 years old, was her bottom was burned, and her hair was pulled out by her husband, and that she needed me to come and help her. And my daughter was raised in Hawaii, and she paddled on the canoe teams on Maui, and she's a very strong, I don't know if you're familiar with the word tida, but she's a true tida. She weighs about 170 pounds, and she's really big. She's paddled to Molokai several times from Lahaina. And for my daughter to call me and ask me for help, I knew that she was really hurt. And so she told me that she had been physically abused by her husband. And of course, being a practitioner and also a sharer of the Dharma, I felt that I really had to call upon the highest potential I am as a human being to understand what was happening and to not be swept away with anger. Well, I was swept away with a lot of anger. All I could do and see myself is I wanted to strangle him. I wanted to push him down. I wanted to kick him. All these things went through my mind, of course. And I was very present with what was happening, of course not acting on it. And so, with a lot of anger, I took the next flight to the mainland, to San Diego, and he hadn't been picked up by the police yet. And we had to pack all the things sort of in the middle of the night when he went to work, and I understood that he was going to be picked up from work. And but then my daughter, we got up in the middle of the night to pack. He left about 10. We got up after that, and we packed things all night to go. And during the time that he was in our presence, it was very, very difficult for me. I had a lot of practice just being fully and as openly as I can without responding in a physical way or with words to the fiery anger that went through my heart that made me feel so separate from him and the world. And so I learned that he wasn't picked up by the police and that he might come home because he was calling and whatnot. And so early in the morning. And so we rushed out of there. And it was very difficult for me to handle my daughter and my granddaughter on the way home. I felt I was burning up with anger, and also my heart was closed down, and I was also losing all of my energy. I felt like my energy was imprisoned, and I couldn't let go. And so we got back to Hawaii, and through some sequence of events, he called once. He was calling for her. And at one time I spoke with him. And during the time I spoke with him, he was burning up with anger too. And when it was during that time that I realized that I'm suffering just like he is, that he cannot have a clear state of mind because of this anger, and I cannot have a clear state of mind because of the anger I was having. And in just a moment, or a moment's time, that anger and that feeling separate from life and feeling and I felt through that anger very, very connected with him. And there was this anger, and then it sort of transformed to compassion, because I could understand it hurts to be separate from you. It hurts to be feel like I can't connect. It hurts to suffer this way, and it must hurt you also. And because of that kind of understanding, my heart could open to him, and I could feel that I don't have to tell him that what he did was right, but in some way I could forgive him. I'll talk a little bit about loving kindness now. And most of loving kindness will come from your own experience when we do the practice at the end here. So, loving kindness was part of the Buddha's teaching. It was a teaching that the Buddha gave to some monks who were practicing in the forest at one time. And they were overcome by fear and anxiety because of some beings that occupied the trees, some kind of celestial beings that were occupying the trees, and they were scaring the monks. And so they went back to the Buddha, and the Buddha gave them this practice to kind of pacify their hearts and minds and overcome his fear. So basically, it's protection from the forces of fear, from hatred, and also from attachment. Of the four Brahma-viharas, or the four divine abodes that Sananda talked about, loving kindness is the most potent in uprooting or eliminating the most toxic forces that we deal with as human beings, that being hatred and greed. Those are the forces that keep us bound on this wheel of suffering. And loving kindness is of the four, the one that balances, and then eventually with mindfulness uproots those two. It promotes and cultivates a stillness or an equanimity and a balance. We notice in life that our reactions are quite unreliable. Usually if we don't like something, we respond with aversion right away. We don't have any kind of training for ourselves to respond with either compassion, loving kindness, or one of the other Brahma-viharas. And so this practice of loving kindness trains our minds to become more reliable. It trains us ourselves to be able to have a confidence in ourselves that we can rely on our reactions to life. And we can change our habitual reactions to life to reactions and responses to life that are instilled with wisdom and that are skillful. Also, loving kindness helps us to connect with others more. When our hearts are open, then we can connect with others. But we usually see when there's aversion or some kind of hatred or greed, our hearts are closed and we're not connecting. Our society breeds a kind of self-absorption, a kind of egocentricness, and loving kindness is a practice that helps us to eliminate that and to lessen our importance of self and see the greater importance of being interconnected with all of life. There is a deep ecologist by the name of Susie Gablick, and there was something very interesting that I read about a year ago. She said that fungus has a very important role in our earth. It has something to do with oxygen and how it interacts with oxygen. And oxygen is very important for all of us, of course. So she said that if fungus were eliminated, the whole world, the whole earth would wither and die. On the other hand, if human beings were eliminated, the earth would thrive. And she was making this point because she says that we live mostly in an egocentric world, where we're always looking towards satisfying ourselves mostly. And what she's trying to point out is that we can learn to live in a more ecocentric world, where we're not so absorbed with self. So all of these practices connect with others and help us to live a more ecocentric life. There's something I just like to end with. Once I heard an interview with the Dalai Lama, and he's a great inspirer for me in my life today. And they asked him in this interview, and his answer to me was very explicit and very inspiring about his wisdom and his compassion and his loving kindness. They said, your lands have been raped, and so have your temples and many of your nuns. And how do you respond to that? Don't you respond with anger or impatience? Is this difficult for you? And in a very calm way, the Dalai Lama responded, they have taken so much away. Should I let them also take my mind, my heart? And so this is what I think about all the time when situations such as my son-in-law come up in my life. You know, why should I let my heart be taken away? Why should I let my heart close down? So we as human beings have a much greater potential that we live up to, and we can all be greater as human beings than we are. So maybe later we'll be doing the practice, and you'll be able to see for yourself how you can do these practices. Thank you.
Tamara, before we continue with the program, I have some housekeeping thing to do. Professor Chappell asked